Welcome to our upcoming three-part video series on winning new and rebid B2B sales during COVID. Joining me is Jason Jordan. Jason is steeped in B2B sales and sales management. His experiences encompass chief revenue officer roles in emerging companies. He is an author and also a lecturer at UVA's Darden School of Business. And Jason is an accomplished subject matter expert in B2B sales effectiveness and training. Jason, feel free to add additional background.
I was thinking about this before we got on. It's kind of hard to describe what I do. I've had an interesting career. I started out in sales, and then for 15 years, I consulted to sales leadership teams. And then for another decade, I had a company training and developing leadership teams, which is where I did the research and wrote the book, Cracking the Sales Management Code, which you're referring to. And then for the last couple of years, I've been working with private equity companies, both doing consulting, but also 3 times over the last 2 years, as you mentioned, dropping in as an interim chief revenue officer. So that's been getting dropped in and out of companies as the head of revenue has been an interesting experience.
It has been. And Jason, you and I go back many years, and I always appreciate your insights and knowledge. And with that, let's get into our first video. It's titled, How to Effectively Win New B2B Sales During COVID. Many companies are emphasizing retention at this point. While this is essential, we can't ignore the top of the sales funnel. Our data shows 3 main reasons for winning new sales. First and foremost is having a strong relationship. This is most prevalent in larger deals when we look at the total contract value of what is being evaluated. Second is offering a competitive financial package. Now, this alone is never a sole reason for winning, but obviously that's in there. This is also prevalent in larger deals, and just reflects that it's a larger deal, so a small percentage shift either way can have a profound actual dollar impact. And the third is understanding requirements, and that's not always easy on a new deal opportunity. So with the changing in business climate, both social norms and just ways of interacting, all due to COVID, as a corporate sales leader responsible for continued growth, Jason, what are a few suggested innovative strategies for a selling organization to gain an edge in these days?
Well, I think that the front end of the sales cycle is the part that's been most disrupted by these kind of working from home times. Lead generation is really challenging for a number of reasons. First of all, we don't have our networking events and our industry conferences and places that we really got a lot of businesses, not only business, but also building relationships for referral purposes. I mean, there's a lot that goes on there other than just drinking beer and sitting outside in a beautiful place. And then there's the added challenge of being virtual, right? So in the beginning of the process from prospecting, obviously getting in contact, so the physical meetings are gone, right? So we're not networking in that way. People often aren't at their offices, right? So you call their office phone, they're not there. So a lot of challenges in just starting initiating the conversation. But then once you get into the conversation, especially as you mentioned on large deals or long sales cycle, part of it is building credibility and trust. And in large industrial sales, people are buying the salesperson as much as the product in some ways, because they have to be believable and credible and all those things. And being distant also makes that challenging. I think that the video conferencing trend helps a lot. Being able to see the buyer is much better than being able to hear the buyer, right? You can tell if they're paying attention, if they're leaning in, if they're smiling, if they're nodding. Reading the person on the other side of the desk, so to speak, is critically important. But I think as far as strategies and tactics go, I've seen, and you've seen it a lot as well, very ugly videos, right? You're staring at people who are sitting in front of windows and people at, room with the bed undone in the back. And I think something that companies are starting to pick around the edges of is kind of both standardizing etiquette, so to speak. When you're speaking to customers, this matters, and also providing the equipment for people to have a professional video conference so that you can build that rapport, look credible and competent. In fact, I did some research over the summer on video meeting preferences. It was really fascinating. But 81% of people said that they would purchase they would be more likely to purchase from someone who had a professional appearance online rather than someone who looked, sloppy or however disorganized. So this stuff matters, particularly if you're trying to build credibility. And again, I think the front end of the process is what's been so disrupted.
No, that's fascinating when you talk about first impressions, because whether face to face or in video discussions like we're having here, I mean, that's just so important. And in a video, you really don't have a lot of room for error. I mean, uh, when you're face to face, you have gestures, you might be able to pull up some information to show. And on a video call, you don't always have that capability. Are there any other interesting findings from your research that you conducted over the summer?
Well, so many. But I will say something about the importance of video, which is, so there's a very often quoted study by Dr. Moravian that 93% of all communication is nonverbal, right? And we quote that all the time. It's obviously not true. I mean, he himself said that is misquoted very often. He could tell you to go close the door, with no inflection or no intonation. Like, it's clear what he could write it on a piece of paper. But what his research was done for, 93% of the communication of emotions, right? He was trying to study how people communicate emotions and attitude. And that's exactly what a salesperson needs to see, right? They need to see, as I said before, the attitude, disposition, the emotions of the person on the other side. So while that metric is often misquoted, I think it's completely accurate in this case. And so the trick is to get the other person on the video call, right? There's some things you can do leading up to it to get that. And then you always show your video. Even if the buyer is not sharing his or hers, you're going to look more credible and more confident and more professional if you do.
Well, that's interesting. I had a discussion with a client just about 2 weeks ago, and it was just on that point. When selling, do you follow your prospects' protocols or desires, and not, if you don't see them showing the video, you don't activate yours, or do you just go ahead and go into the call with the camera on?
Well, so in the research I did, around 80% of people preferred to see the speaker rather than just the slides.
Right.
Because overwhelmingly, people want to see the person who's presenting. I mean, people want a natural experience. They want the experience to be as much like being in person, as possible. And I'll just give you one story right quick. So a couple of years ago, it's been before this current situation, someone sent me a meeting request. It was a salesperson, actually. And I just accepted it. I didn't look inside it. And when 2 minutes before the meeting, I went to click on the phone number. There's no phone number. It's a web link. So I was probably wearing sweatpants or something, so I didn't turn my camera on for a very specific purpose. And that's the one reason most people don't turn on their cameras, is because their background is inappropriate for whatever reason. And she showed her video, and I paused. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm not set up to show my video. And she goes, that's fine. And she just stayed on the video the entire time. I felt like such a voyeur. I said, please just turn off your video. And she's like, no, it's really fine. It doesn't bother me at all. And it was a weird power dynamic. Like, I felt as though she had more power in the relationship because of how confident she was, undisturbed by it. And so I very much believe that you keep that thing on, because people want to see you, and it also says something.
I had that exact same experience. I opened up the invite and saw it was a Teams meeting, and I was sitting there after my morning hike with my son. So I just put on a clean T-shirt. No, put on a clean shirt, but put on a company hat. So at least I had a logo sitting there.
Well played.
What this kind of brings up, Jason, is if, like, right now, if you have a sales team of X number of people, nationally or globally, and if there's one thing to train on, it sounds like it could be selling remotely, and the insights that you gleaned from your research, that's so powerful.
It is, and I've not really marketed this training program that I developed based on the research, but several companies have already bought it just because they were participating in the research itself. And it's just small things. A friend of mine told me this, and I hadn't thought about it. Be so right. The elevator walk, right? So if you go to a meeting, you have some sponsor or host, right? You go into the meeting, and then after the meeting, they walk you to the elevator. And so much valuable information is exchanged, in that 3 minutes while you're walking and standing waiting for the elevator. Hey, how did that go? he looked like he was responding negatively. Is that just it? And so the elevator walk is gone. And so one tactic is when you're scheduling the larger group meeting, at the same time, also schedule a separate small meeting for immediately after it with your host or sponsor, right? Because otherwise what happens, and this from doing webinars and stuff, is you just end the webinar, turn off the video, and it's like total silence. You're sitting in your office by yourself.
Right.
It's like it just ends so abruptly, and there's no feedback. So there are strategies and tactics that you can employ to sell a little better. I mean, obviously the selling motion is the same. I mean, the buyer's business need is going to be the same. Their buying process is probably going to be very similar, but there are just challenges in communication that this brings on.
Jason, this is incredible insight, and we could probably spend at least another 30 minutes talking about your research alone. But the key takeaway is that impressions are incredibly important. We've always known that in selling, but with this new medium that we're all having to embrace, your insights, very pragmatic, but very, very powerful. This is a great video today, and I really appreciate your time, and we look forward to having you back for our next month's video as part of this series. Jason, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rick.